Hello everyone, that is Stefan from Extreme Distribution here from our office in Munich, sunny Munich today. I'm here together or remotely with David Dong from Capella Systems. He's in his California office in San Jose. A very warm welcome to all of you. We want to have a session today about Capella Systems live transcoding series. Capella Systems is our partner for all about transcoding, live and file transcoding. The file transcoder is meanwhile quite popular and was bought by many customers throughout Europe and worldwide. We have first customers now moving into the live transcoding here from Europe as well. We want to give some more insights into that product line today. This is why we have David with us. David Dong is Director of Solution Engineering at Capella Systems. I'm Stefan Pfütze, Managing Director at Extreme Media, Extreme Distribution. What's our today's agenda? We want to have a look, as said, on the live series. There are 3 products that we will look into. That's the transcoding engine. It is a so-called live editing application, and it's a live transcoding file manager. And then last but not least, we want to have a look into the new features and updates from this year. And obviously, you can always raise questions. I would like to encourage you to do so. You've got a chat available on the right-hand side in that panel of this webinar application. Please feel free to type in questions whenever you want. We will try to raise them as soon as possible, but latest at the end of that session today. Now it's time for a demo. I will try to hand over the screen sharing to David. And David, please introduce yourself as well.
The first thing, I'd like to kind of thank everybody for joining us here today. I've been with Capella Systems for a little over 10 years. I kind of joined near its inception. Previously, I've worked at both Rosette and Canopus on the services and support teams there. And Capella's been around for about 10 years. I'll try not to bore you with the details. We started out developing a software called Cambria Capture, and the software basically ingested SDI to uncompressed intermediate format and then transcoded to basically compressed formats. Now, Cambria Capture is now kind of considered a legacy product, but it basically paved the way to both our kind of flagship products now. We have a product called Cambria FTC, which is an offline file-to-file transcoder. I won't be talking about that product much today. Instead, I'm going to talk about our other product, which is Cambria Live. And basically, Cambria Live is our product for live encoding and streaming. And Cambria Live basically started out as an alternative to Adobe Media Live Encoder. It's basically grown tremendously since we first started. And now we basically have a group of products called Cambria Live Series. And this represents all our offerings in the live encoding and streaming side of our company. And so I'm going to talk about Cambria Live. And so in the Cambria Live series, our main product in what we basically call the encoding engine for live streaming is called Cambria Live. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Cambria Live, just the UI here, so you guys could see it as I kind of talk about some of its features. But Cambria Live basically has 3 modes of operation. One of them is through basically a manual kind of operator sitting in front of the machine. We also have functions for automation, so you could be used kind of automatively. And then we also have a REST-based API that you could use to control Cambria Live. I'm going to talk about some of its inputs currently. So Cambria Live can basically capture from SDI or HDMI as long as you have an AJA capture card in the actual system itself. We could also take files as inputs. And then we also do RTP input, RTMP input, and we could also capture the actual screen from the desktop as well. So we could do that both from the local desktop and also the remote desktop. So these are all inputs that we could actually input into Cambria Live. And then as an output, we have basically a long kind of list of outputs that we support. So starting with, if you look in the application on the right-hand side, we have RTMP, your kind of default RTMP server. And if you actually go in and look at some of our target presets, you'll see that we have, you could specify the RTMP server address up at the top. If there's credentials to actually get into the server, you could actually input those credentials here. We also have settings for the encoding settings. So all of our outputs are actually encoded to X264. And so you'll find the X264 settings here. And then if you hit show advanced settings, we have even more settings. So if you want to actually go in and kind of configure the actual encoding setting in more detail, you could do so. Things like being able to set the GOP size, being able to set whether or not you want to use B frames or not. You could actually control some of the encoding settings such as motion estimation, and also subpixel motion estimation. So you'll find a number of encoding settings here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the rest of our target options here. So we could output to CMAF, and when you do so, you could choose whether or not you want to go to an Akamai server, WebDAV, AWS MediaStore, AWS S3. So these are all kind of target output options that you have when you choose some of our settings. And then if you look at the encoding settings for both CMAF, MPEG-, and also HLS, you'll have the option to actually add the various encoding layers. So if you want to do an HD stream and multiple SD layers in the same delivery, you could do that. So we also could output to places like Brightcove, Facebook, YouTube, Wowza. We could write to a file at the same time we're outputting to these locations. We could also do RTP output. And finally, again, if you have a AJA input-output card, we could actually output SDI as well. And so I've prepared a kind of a project to save time. I've loaded a project in with assets. So that's what you should see on screen right now. And so that you could see kind of how our program looks kind of fully loaded. Now, again, there's multiple different methods of operation. And so in the case of if you're using Cambria Live on site at an event, you might actually have, lots of assets in your picture-in-picture columns, such as lower thirds that you could apply. You might have multiple titles and also multiple sources. So what you'll find on the very left-hand side is kind of all the sources that I have preloaded. And I'm just going to walk down and talk about some of the sources that we have. So right now I'm actually hooked up to a AJA capture card. And so you're actually seeing input here that I've selected here from the actual capture card itself. And this is just streaming in from basically a Blackmagic player. Below that, I've actually added a few assets that are file assets. So you'll see one of them is just kind of an image file. And then it basically says, we are experiencing technical difficulty. So this is a slate that you could basically use as kind of your failover. So in case something happens to the input source, we could actually automatically switch to a different source that you have in the application. So if the SDI feed cuts out, we could switch this automatically. We could also take in video files and use those video files in the application as well. And then the last thing that I have on the assets column here is a playlist. And for the playlist, you'll see kind of a number of source files that I've loaded, and you could have as many playlists as you want, and then you could always switch these playlists to play during your live stream. It's fairly easy to kind of drop in new files, reorder them, and play them back when you need them. The middle column that you see under the assets is basically the picture-in-picture column, but this is how we actually apply lower thirds too. So our application doesn't generate lower thirds, but you could actually import basically video files with alpha channels inside of our application to use as lower thirds. But when you have something like this in our application, I'm going to blow it up so you can see it a little bit better here. We do have controls where you can actually move it around screen. So if I do this, for example, you'll see that I've applied the lower third. Right now I have it set as on a repeat so that you could see it in the staging preview. But you could easily kind of move this lower third around the screen and it will show up wherever you want to move it to. So we have easy controls to allow you to kind of adjust where you want certain assets to show up on screen. And then on the right-hand side, we have a layer column, and the layer column allows you to actually insert titles. So you'll see that I have a title inserted here that says movie trailer. I can move that around screen. I could actually add a transparency if I want to that. And then on the layer column, we also have the ability to do a scrolling title. So I've kind of added a scrolling title here. It's scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Again, you could change the speed of how fast that scrolling title moves. You could change the position of where you want it to show up on screen. And part of Cambria Live also is a compositor. So we could easily kind of composite various assets that you see in the different columns together. That way you could kind of quickly bring it up in your live stream. And so what I'll do is I'll just quickly kind of create two composites right now. I'll keep the scrolling title running, maybe with the main capture source here. And then if I'm happy with that as a composite, I could just hit this button on the lower left here in the composition section and give it a title. I'll call it main with scrolling. And then for the other one, I might then select my playlist and then give it a title here, and then make that another composite. So the ideas of the composite is that prior to the show starting, you could kind of quickly build up a storyboard of the various compositions that you're going to use during the live event, and it'll allow you to kind of quickly switch between the compositions as you go, and you won't have to deal with a bunch of different assets through the assets columns to kind of switch in and out. And it makes things fairly easy if this is kind of the style of the live stream that you want to deliver. And so you'll see now that I could actually even hide the assets column and then just kind of switch between the compositions that I have. So what I'm going to show you next is another feature that we have within Cambria Live, which is our Cambria Live editor. So if you look under the targets tab that I have showing here, you'll see that I'm streaming to an Akamai server, but I also have a file write going at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'll just choose my first composition here, and then I'm going to hit the start streaming button. And so when I'm doing that, you'll see that the program output on the right-hand side actually shows that the stream has started. Right now, we're currently streaming to Akamai, but we're also writing a file down to the local system. And this is how, this is where we could actually use our other feature called Live Edit. So while we're streaming, since we're writing a file down to the system, we allow the operator to actually go through the live stream that has happened and then actually grab various highlight segments. So this tool is currently showing up in our live streaming application, but we also have a side application called Cambria Live Editor, which could actually sit on different machines. And so if the person that's running the live stream doesn't have time to actually go through and grab the highlight segments himself, he could actually pass that responsibility off to somebody sitting on another machine looking at the same capture that he is, so that he could grab highlights. So an example of how you would use this is, let's say there's an exciting section of video that we want to grab. We could actually scrub the timeline down here at the bottom, and we could go and set an endpoint. and then go ahead and set an out point. And so if you look in the center of the screen, I'm just going to play that segment back. And if you're happy with that particular segment as kind of the highlight segment you want to grab, now you're able to take that segment and do a couple things with it. So the first thing is that we could actually send that segment off to an offline file-to-file transcoder to have that file transcoder create a bunch of different formats from that highlight segment. So you'll see here that I'm connected to another machine which has a file-to-file transcoder on it. And it's set right now so that if I send this segment off, it's going to go ahead and create an MP4 output and also an MXF output from that particular segment. And then, so once I want to submit it, all I have to do is hit the submit button here and give the segment a name. I'm just going to call it wrapped. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit submit on that. And then once it's submitted, you'll see on this other screen that the segment will then be passed off to the file-to-file encoder and then encoded. And once it's actually complete, it'll let you know that that particular segment has encoded and has been delivered to where it's supposed to go. Another function of Cambria Live Edit is that you could, instead of sending it to an offline file-to-file transcoder, if you want, you could actually take that highlight segment back into the live streaming application to be broadcasted to whoever's watching. So instead of submitting to the file-to-file transcoder, what I could do is I could say submit it back to the local Cambria Live that's here, and then hit submit. And then when you do that, you'll see that segment pop up in the lower left-hand corner here of the source window. And when I click it, it's obviously going to go ahead and switch to that particular file. And so that's how Cambria Live is used. Another way you could actually use Cambria Live is that the operator that's sitting in front of the live stream, if he might not have the time to actually set in and out points, but he could actually go ahead and mark certain points of interest for the actual live editors that are editing on different machines for them to look at those points. And so the way he could do that is that he would basically use this window that's in the kind of center of the screen that says local marker. And he would add various markers at the different points. So he could actually, if he wanted to, scrub to the point and add the marker, or he could just watch the main video that's playing and then hit the now button for when he would like a marker being placed. So let's say right now is where I would like a marker. He could set a certain color to flag various situations for the editors downstream. And let's say it's this commercial section we want to try to remove. We could easily kind of mark that section here, and the other editors will actually see the same marker appear on their timelines, and they could easily grab the in and out points on their machines to cut in, cut out, and actually granularly look frame by frame to see exactly where they want to set in and out. So that's Cambria. Yes.
As you just show us the shared editing, I know that Live Edit is available as a standalone editing application as well as a kind of a client. Could you show that to us as well, or could you at least explain how that would look and how the both people would work together?
So, I don't have that set up on my machine now, but it's fairly easy to explain what it would look like. So you could imagine, so what I'm going to do with Cambria Live is I'm just going to remove some of the windows that we have in our application. And Cambria Live Editor is designed to almost look like how Live Edit normally shows up inside of Cambria Live. So if you look at this on screen now, I've kind of removed most of the Cambria Live windows, and I just have Cambria Live Edit almost maximized to the kind of the fullest extent. And this is what Cambria Live Editor, which is running on a separate machine, would actually look like. So the editor sitting there would actually still be able to see the incoming video. So as you can see, there's a timeline that's actually still growing because we're actually, of course, writing down the disk, and the Cambria Live Editor would be able to read from those files. and that editor would be able to edit the same way. They'd be able to scrub the timeline, they'd be able to set in and out points, and they would have access basically to the same submission functions that you would get through Cambria Live Edit. So unfortunately,
is there a limit of the number of people that can work together?
It's as many people that want to edit at the same time. There's probably a theoretical limit, but you know, you could have, let's say, up to 10 editors working on the same project at one time, and it would be no problem.
So definitely more than enough what you can use for one live input stream.
Yes, correct. So you know, we basically generate a proxy file in the background that's very easy for multiple people to access and scrub and play back. So there's really no limitation there, and each of the editors would be using their own separate machine, which has our application on it. So that wouldn't be a problem either. And each editor will have their own, basically their own local markers. So if you look on the left-hand side, it says local marker here. They would actually have their own local markers, in addition to being able to see the kind of the shared markers that the kind of original editor actually put onto their list. So is there any other questions about Live Edit before I move on, Stefan?
Thank you so much. Please move on.
Thank you. What I'm going to talk about next is kind of I'm going to switch our application so it looks like how it did before. So our application is very customizable, as you just saw. You can move windows around. You could actually remove some of the panel windows you see in the assets column. And the reason why we do that is because, you know, again, some use cases for this application is at a live event with multiple cameras, with multiple assets, and there needs to be kind of lots of control. Other types of applications of this application is that, you know, someone might just have one input and only use Cambria Live Edit. So in which case you would want to kind of get rid of all the other windows, just make it a little bit easier to kind of see and use. But what I want to talk about is some of the automation features that we have in our application. So what you've seen me up to this point is you've seen me kind of control things manually, but we actually have functions in our application to allow for automation. One of them is through the controller plugin manager here. So we have a controller plugin which allows you, the user, to actually write your own plugins if you want to use those plugins within our application. We also have a few sample plugins which allow for things like we could look at let's say an XML list that tells us when to actually switch between sources, when to load different sources into our application. And one of the use cases for this is we have basically a news station which is running a 24/7 service, and their news systems are continually changing this XML list that's we're looking at in the background. And every time there's a change to the list, we'll know that change has been made, and we'll actually make that change in the live stream itself. So you could, you know, for example, you know, if the weather changes, they would basically put that into the XML list and say, change this title to reflect the new weather conditions. And our live streaming application would be able to grab that kind of almost in real time and make that update to the live stream. And then, of course, the viewers will see what's being output at that time. Another way that we can automate is through this auto control tab. So this auto control tab basically allows a user to go through and specify different times based on kind of a wall clock time or a trigger time. So you could say something like, at 10 o'clock today, I'd like to change from source 1 to source 2. You could say something like, at 12 o'clock, I would like to switch to the playlist and play this commercial playlist. You could also actually go through and disable and enable various target settings that we have at the different times. So maybe with your live stream is running, let's say 24/7, but you actually want to capture at 3 o'clock to 3:30, you want to basically grab a file of that show at that time. It's easy to do that through this kind of automated tool. So that's what we basically, this is basically the feature that we have in the base product that we have, which is Cambria Live. So I'm going to move on to Cambria Broadcast Manager. And Cambria Broadcast Manager is basically has the ability to manage multiple Cambria Lives at the same time. So it basically answers the question, what do you do when you have more than just one event? How do you want to control that? So Broadcast Manager basically answers that. It controls multiple nodes of Cambria Live. It contains a scheduler and also has program failover. Also does things like ad insertion. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Broadcast Manager so you could see that. And before we do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just switch to the next slide so you can actually see what it looks like. So Broadcast Manager sits on top of multiple Cambria Lives. And of course, Cambria Live has the ability to input these formats. Along with Broadcast Manager, you have the capability to also do ad insertion. So I'll talk about that a little later. And so right now I have a Broadcast Manager open up in front of us here. And Broadcast Manager has, of course, multiple tabs. It comes with a scheduler first. So let's talk about the scheduler a little bit. So, the scheduler has basically a calendar and shows you what events are actually kind of preloaded into Broadcast Manager. And so you'll see here that I have kind of 3 events loaded. One of them, which is already kind of run and is expired, and 2 of them that are actually upcoming. And at the time that these events are scheduled to run, it will basically launch a Cambria Live on a different machine to basically run the live event. And so how Cambria Broadcast Manager chooses which machine to actually launch on is based on how many Cambria Lives you have in your environment and how many are actually hooked up to the Broadcast Manager itself. So I've clicked on the next tab over, which basically shows you all the machines that we have kind of connected to my current system. I only have 2 machines right now that are enabled to be used by this Broadcast Manager. And what you'll see here is if I switch back on the programs list, you'll see that Broadcast Manager already knows that it plans to assign, the first event to the first machine there, the DDI9 machine, and then the second event to the Z4-2 machine. And I'm going to click into one of these events so you can see some of the options that we have inside of an event. So what is an event made of? It's basically you specify how often you want the event to run. So in this particular case, it's set to a one-time event. But you could actually set daily events. You could also set weekly events where you choose which days of the week you would like Broadcast Manager to automatically start a Cambria Live instance. And then an event is also made up of, if I look down here, kind of various routing. So if you are using Cambria Broadcast Manager and Cambria Live in an environment where there's lots of kind of SDI cables hooked up and you're using an SDI router, this is where our Broadcast Manager would actually be told which SDI inputs to use and which ones to not use. And then the event is also made up of a Cambria Live project. And so you would basically build your Cambria Live project first, just like the projects we were showing previously. you would save that project, and then you could kind of use that project inside of the broadcast manager. And so we have two kind of pre-made projects here, and two pre-made events. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start those programs so you can see what happens. And you'll see that we're now launching these events, and now they're being assigned to those machines. And then once assigned, you'll see that in the timeline view, you'll see that it's blinking green, which basically means these projects are now being launched on those machines that's it's specified to launch on. And once the stream actually runs, if everything's going smoothly, it's going to go ahead and go solid green. So that way you'll know it's running perfectly fine. But another feature of Broadcast Manager is it has the capability to actually monitor these events as well. So you could actually go to the output preview to see if your projects are actually running smoothly, correctly or not. So one of the key features of Broadcast Manager is that it has the ability to actually do failover and also redundancy. So you want basically program failover for the projects that you are running, just in case a machine goes down. So let's take this example where I have channel 1 here running on the Z4-2 machine. So let's go ahead and take a look at that machine. So you'll see that I've kind of remoted to a different machine here, and you'll see that we have a kind of a project running in the background. So BCM, Cambria Broadcast Manager, launched this machine launched this project on this machine, and you'll see it's complaining right now because one of the targets here it can access the file write location. So I'll just go ahead and turn that off. But what I want to show you is that it is running in the background. And if I go back to Cambria Broadcast Manager, you'll see that in the timeline view that it's running, and it's running just fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the remote machine, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and restart this machine. I'll just shut it down here. And you'll see that if we go back to the Broadcast Manager, pretty soon our kind of detection mechanisms to see if the machine is still running will realize this machine is no longer available. And what will happen is that this particular event that's currently assigned to the Z4 machine will actually get reassigned to a different machine, so that that event could actually still run. So as you can see, there's an error that has occurred here as our Broadcast Manager has realized that the machine is no longer available. And then right now the reassigning has happened, and it's kind of reassigned that particular project to a different machine. And then if we switch back to the timeline view, you'll see that it's starting now that other project on this new machine. So that's kind of one of the key features of having Broadcast Managers, having that kind of peace of mind that even if something goes wrong with one of the live streaming machines, that we could still kind of take that project, give it to a different machine, and then have it continue to run. And then you'll see that we also have error indicators still in our application to allow the operator to know if they're looking at this, that, hey, an error has occurred, which forced us to kind of pass this job to a different machine. So some more features of Broadcast Manager is, again, on the Machines tab, you could actually see, which machines are actually currently connected, what the CPU usage of that particular machine are. We could actually right-click here and remote desktop fairly quickly to that machine. We have the ability to specify how many Cambria Live instances could actually run on the machine. So as your machine, as you use Cambria Live on a stronger machine, you have the capability to use more live instances at the same time. And so, for example, if you have, let's say, 4 different Cambria Live projects, each with its own SDI input, and you want each with its own output destination, you could actually, instead of getting 4 machines, run that on 1 machine and just run multiple instances on the 1 machine. So we have that capability as well. The actual Cambria Broadcast Manager has the ability to have redundancy for itself. So you could actually set up another machine to be the backup Cambria Broadcast Manager machine. So if anything happens to the main Broadcast Manager, all the kind of controlling functionality will be switched over to the backup manager. And again, we have monitoring functions inside of Broadcast Manager. So we have the ability to kind of send email notifications out in case, let's say, your license is expired on one of the machines, or if a machine is running out of disk space. We can tell, the operator when a program actually starts, when it stops. We could do source checks. So, if there are assets inside of the Cambria Live projects that are no longer accessible because maybe, a NAS location where the files are got shut down or something like that, we could actually inform the operators, and we could do that actually, 30 minutes, for example, prior to the program starting, so they could go ahead and try to take care of that problem. We have notifications for kind of general running errors. So if a stream, for whatever reason, starts to have an error, we could let people know. So if, let's say, there's some kind of network congestion and the stream starts dropping frames or stops, we could let somebody know that. And then we have various notifications for our controller plugin. And we also have kind of a handy feature here for automatically rebooting the Cambria Live machines that you have connected to Broadcast Manager. So if you're running a Broadcast Manager, which is controlling multiple machines that are always streaming, every once in a while you may want to kind of reboot that machine just to make sure that you kind of clear the machines cache and resources, make sure that's kind of running optimally. And when you do that, you could kind of specify how many, after how many days you would like to schedule a reboot, and kind of specify a reboot window so it doesn't interrupt any of your running programs. And finally, we have another feature called ad break control as part of Cambria Broadcast Manager. So when you get Broadcast Manager, you also basically enable the ad insertion capabilities of Cambria Live and also Broadcast Manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the ad insertion part just basically through slides right now. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the slide here. With ad insertion, we have kind of multiple different ways you could do ad insertion. And so the slide that you see up here talks about ad insertion with the ad break control software that we have. And basically that's a software that allows a manual operator to basically watch the live stream and insert ads manually based on kind of his timing and his prediction of where the commercial insertion should be. But we could actually also insert kind of SCSI signals for ads based on the incoming input. If the incoming input actually has SCSI information in it, we could actually pass that along to the target. We could also insert kind of SCSI information based on potentially an eSUM server that you have. We could look at that server and kind of use it for kind of timing purposes on when to insert ads. We could also insert ads based on kind of external signals or even software cues or timecode cues. So we have a bunch of different ways we could actually decide where to insert ads. And you'll see here that the ad insertion basically is you tell us how to insert ads to Broadcast Manager. Broadcast Manager will relay that information to the Cambria Live, and Cambria Live can output, let's say, to HLS or MPEG-, and inside of the manifest file, it will include those SCSI insertion points, so that systems downstream of us could decide to insert ads based on their own ad server decision-making functions. Here are some more screenshots of some of our ad settings in our application. So you have the option to kind of specify an ad preset. You could specify kind of a parameter value for the inserts that we're doing. And then again, systems downstream of us will take that parameter value that they see in our files, or our streams, and then decide what to do with those and those data points. And here's another screenshot of kind of our ad break control. This is the manual ad insertion application that we have. You'll see that the operator that's sitting and using our application could actually look at multiple events at the same time. And then based on what's happening, all he needs to do is basically click on the various ad insert buttons that we have to insert the ads. You could easily kind of specify that you want an ad to be, 30 seconds long, 1 minute long. It's all kind of user customizable. There are also functions to kind of switch to an emergency ad if you don't want to use one of kind of your pre-canned ads. Instead, you want to kind of switch to an emergency ad. That's easy to do. And we also have functions that allow us to use kind of telemetry data from various third parties that we interface with. So, for example, if we're streaming to Yospace, for example, we could actually grab how many viewers are actually watching the streams. And so thus the operator that's using this kind of manual tool to insert ads could use that in some of his decision making to insert the ad or not. So that's basically what we have so far. And I'm just going to pause real quick to see if Stefan has any questions so far for me before I talk about what's coming in the future.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so to all of you, I would like to encourage you once again to write your questions into the chat. In the meantime, I have one. David, I'm really impressed. So it looks like this is a huge product line, just all about live transcoding. And as we just see with that screenshot that you showed that very moment, we are still have not hit the end. So there's more to come. But please help me a little bit. You've shown us various applications for manual operations. You've shown us the farm, the broadcast manager. You've shown us how this can all scale and can be automated. Where are the special strengths, or where is the product playing best? Is it more the small scale manual operations? Is that more the thing that happens in the data center? Is it the fully integrated one? Is it all of that? Yeah, it's I would say that the greatest strength of kind of the entire product line itself is its flexibility. So all the way down from a single event operator, it's fairly easy to operate our software. But then if you wanted to control us via API, you could do that. And then if you want to kind of scale up to the next level and you want to control multiple live events, that's where Broadcast Manager comes into play. And again, we have a user interface, which is easy to use. But if you want to use our APIs, you could do that to kind of control your multiple live events on multiple machines. Our application could actually run in the cloud as well. So if you want to put us on AWS kind of EC2 machines, then EC3 machines, you could actually put us on there and use us there as well. So we almost fit whatever you want to try to do with our software. There's a way to do it almost. And so
that's basically where our strength lies. So if there's a workflow that you're having problems kind of covering with another software or some other companies you've tried with that you've had problems with, come to us and we could get our software running, and we could probably kind of curtail our software to run the way you want it to run to cover the workflows that you're targeting.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so it definitely looks like that the customers themselves can configure quite a lot, so they are not fully dependent on a professional services team to come in. But if they have developers at hand, they can even do all the crazy things around by their own developments. And then there are us who always can help and can step in. So there are no questions so far. Please go ahead and tell us what are the news for this year.
Okay, so we are working on Cambria Live Packager. In fact, the first versions are available already for testing. And what is Cambria Live Packager? It's kind of a different take on Broadcast Manager. So imagine Cambria Broadcast Manager. Instead of launching Cambria Live projects, we basically we launch Cambria Live projects in a service in the background, which is designed to use a lot less resources. And so the idea is to build a software that could, instead of doing transcoding, it takes in kind of a live stream, or like let's say a RTP stream or an RTMP stream. It basically demuxes that and repackages it in something else that you want, like HLS or MPEG Dash or RTMP. So an example that we have with the first version that's running is that we could take an RTP in and we could output RTMP. And because we're just kind of demuxing and repackaging and not doing any encoding in that workflow, we don't have we don't really want the overhead of the Cambria Live, everything that the Cambria Live project runs with in the background. And so we've developed this Cambria Live Packager to be able to do that. And so the interface for that, I don't have the interface here, but the interface for that basically looks like Broadcast Manager. And then you set up the packaging job that you want to have running, not through an interface, but through basically a job XML. And if you take a look at the job XML that I have on screen, it's really simple. It's basically saying, hey, we're taking an RTP input and we're outputting to RTMP. So it's very simple. And so what Cambria Live Packager Manager will do is you could still schedule when you want this to occur, just like Broadcast Manager. And you basically say you want this to run at which time, and it will go ahead and assign that to a machine. And that machine will go ahead and run this particular job, which just does the kind of repackaging live and in real time. And because we don't have the overhead of the Cambria Live project running in the background, you can get a lot of streams running on one machine in the background. So it doesn't actually take up a lot of machine resources to actually do this packaging work. And so we have, our product, for example, doing between 10 to 40 packages running in the background on just one AWS machine.
Is the packaging fully independent from the live transcoding, or can it run in a shared platform as well?
It could run on a shared platform, but we haven't got many kind of crossover customers right now. And again, we're kind of really at an early kind of testing phase. But it can run on the same machine if you wanted to. But I would say that most of the current customers that are asking for this, that we have lined up to use the software, are just going to be running this and not running a combination of Cambria Live plus the Cambria Live Packager.
Understood. So the product idea is to separate transcoding from packaging and not to run it both together.
That's correct. We don't really want to sell people what they don't need, and so if they need both and they want to get both running in the same kind of machine, the same platform, we could do that. but you could actually run these separately. Okay, so I mean that's all I have for you guys today. I guess we could open it up for questions if you have any.
I think that was a great insight, David, into the product line, and probably that is sufficient for today. Everyone who's watching this right now live or will watch it later on as the recording, please feel free to make contact with us. Obviously, you can get trials as you can get from like all of our other products. We are very willing to help you to try out the software, to make your own experience and to get addicted to it. That is what we hope that you do. Please, as said, contact us via the known contact details. You will find more information on our website, www.x-dream-distribution.com, and you can see the email address, info or sales in front of, or our phone number. David, have many thanks for joining us today. Many thanks to all of you who have joined us today live here in this webinar, and many thanks to everyone who will watch it later on. See you soon, either here on this channel, means in a webinar on xdream.tv, or at a personal meeting in a little bit more future. But we hope you have enjoyed it, our session today. All the very best, and see you soon again.
Thank you.